I arrived in Berlin on a Sunday afternoon around 3:30 p.m. It was late March and the weather was one of those gray, drizzly days that made the whole city feel quiet. I'd been on the road for almost 3 weeks, mostly hostels and long train rides, so I booked myself a proper hotel this time. Nothing fancy, just something mid-range with private rooms and a front desk that stayed open 24/7. Check-in was uneventful. The staff was professional, quick. A woman in her 30s took my ID, typed something into the computer, and handed me a plastic keycard. "Room 406, she said. "Elevators to your left." I took the elevator up alone. My bag rolled quietly over the hallway carpet. Everything felt clean, quiet, routine. The kind of place where business travelers stay, where nothing unexpected ever happens. The hallway lights were automatic, flickering on as I passed. I found my room, swiped the card, and heard the lock click open. The room looked just like the photos. Modest bed, a desk, a small TV mounted to the wall, blackout curtains pulled tight across the window. The air smelled faintly of hotel soap. The radiator was on low, humming gently. I dropped my suitcase by the door, shrugged off my jacket, and sat on the edge of the bed to check my phone. A couple texts, a low battery alert. I plugged it in by the nightstand and went to the bathroom to wash my face. I remember the mirror was a bit fogged from the heating, maybe. I ran the tap, dried my hands, came out again. That's when I noticed it. The curtains. They didn't look quite right. One of them, the one on the left, wasn't sitting flat against the wall. The hem curved outward slightly like something was behind it. At first, I thought maybe it was just the radiator or an awkward fold. I stepped a little closer. That's when I saw them. Shoes. Black sneakers. Just barely visible beneath the curtain. And then I saw the angle of the feet. They were facing the room. I didn't scream. I didn't move. My brain locked. For a full second, I tried to convince myself it was something else. A reflection. An illusion. Anything. But I knew. Someone was behind the curtain. And they were standing there silent, still watching. I grabbed my phone, left my suitcase behind, and bolted out the door. I didn't stop until I reached the elevator. I didn't look back. Didn't knock. Didn't try to speak. I just hit the L button with my thumb and stood there, trying not to shake. My phone was still plugged in by the bed, but I didn't care. I needed to be anywhere but there. When I reached the lobby, I went straight to the front desk. The same woman who had checked me in was still there. She looked up and smiled automatically. "Everything all right?" "There's someone in my room," I said. My voice was too flat, too quiet, but she heard it. She straightened a little. "I'm sorry. There's someone behind the curtain in my room. Room 406. She stared at me for a second, then stood up. "Okay. Come with me, please." She led me to a small office behind the desk where another staff member, a man in his 40s, joined us. She explained what I'd said, and he immediately called security. They asked me to wait while they checked the room. About 10 minutes passed. I sat in a small, tan plastic chair. I stared at a framed print of the Berlin skyline, my mind running wild. Finally, the staff member returned. "There's no one in the room now," he said. "We checked the closets, under the bed, the bathroom. But..." He hesitated. "The safety lock, the one that's supposed to flip shut from the inside? It was propped open. Someone had jammed it. It wasn't locking." He exchanged a look with the front desk woman. "Housekeeping says it was fine earlier. They cleaned the room at noon and locked it properly." He paused. "We're reviewing the surveillance footage now." They moved me to another room immediately, a different floor, a different wing. I didn't argue. I didn't go back to retrieve my bag, either. Someone brought it for me. I remember watching the porter place it inside the new room, then leave without saying a word. The new room looked identical, but everything felt wrong. I kept looking at the curtains. The next morning, someone from hotel security knocked on my new room door. A man in a blazer with a badge clipped to his belt, plain clothes, polite, professional. He asked if I'd mind answering a few questions before the police arrived. "We found something on the surveillance feed," he said. We sat in the lobby office again. The front desk manager was there now, too. They explained what they'd seen. At around 2:15 p.m., a full hour before I arrived, a man had been caught on camera entering the elevator with what looked like a stolen or cloned staff key card. He exited on the 4th floor, walked directly to room 406, and let himself in. "He was inside your room for over an hour," the security guy said. "He let himself in after housekeeping finished." "Do you know who he is?" I asked. "Not yet," he said carefully. "But he's not a guest. And we've already sent the footage to the police." The police arrived about 20 minutes later. I gave a full report, everything I remembered, the time, the shoes, the curtain, the missing safety latch. They took it seriously. I was offered the option to stay elsewhere, and I accepted. That night, I slept with the lights on. 3 days later, I got a call. It was one of the officers who had interviewed me. He asked if I was somewhere private and then told me, "We've identified and apprehended the man from your hotel room." My chest tightened. He explained the suspect was a known offender already wanted in connection with multiple break-ins and assaults targeting solo female travelers across Germany and the Czech Republic. In one case, the man had waited in a woman's room overnight. He had a pattern, the officer said. Hotels. Early entry. He watched for check-ins and targeted women traveling alone. This time, they found him staying at another budget hotel under a fake name. On him, they recovered a set of illegally copied hotel key cards, a concealed folding knife, and plastic restraints. "You did the right thing leaving immediately," the officer said. I thanked him, but I didn't feel relief. Not really, because I still kept seeing that curtain in my mind, the shoes behind it facing the room. And the terrifying truth. He was already in the room, and I was never supposed to see him first. It was my second evening in Paris. I was staying alone in a boutique hotel tucked just behind Rue Saint-Denis, the kind of place with minimalist furniture, creaky elevators, and fresh croissants in the morning. It wasn't luxury, but it was quiet. I had come to Paris on a whim, mostly to get away, and had no strict itinerary. Just books, headphones, and a long list of cafes to try. I wanted to walk and think and disappear into the rhythm of a city that didn't know me. That night, I ended up at a cafe in the 3rd arrondissement. It wasn't far from my hotel, just a little farther than I'd planned to walk. One of those perfect Parisian corners, a terrace with narrow tables under a faded red awning, a waiter who seemed perpetually irritated, and a long view of an old stone alley. I took a seat alone, ordered a glass of white wine and a simple tartine, and let my bag sit beside my feet. I pulled out a novel I'd been trying to get through, but mostly just watched the city move. People watching is different when you're by yourself. You feel like a camera collecting everything. That's when I noticed the man across the street. He was standing in front of a closed storefront, an art gallery, I think, with his back partially to the wall, hands in his coat pockets, staring at me, or at least in my direction. I tried to glance around to see if he was looking past me at someone else, but there wasn't anyone behind me, just the inside of the cafe and a mirrored wall. It wasn't a glance either. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't waiting for someone, didn't seem like he was in transition. Just still, focused. He was older than me, maybe mid-40s, thin, with a shaved head and pale skin. His coat looked average, dark wool or something like it. Neat scarf, clean shoes. The kind of man you wouldn't look at twice if he passed you on the street. But something about him felt off. Not threatening, not aggressive, just too still, too quiet. I gave it another 30 seconds, pretending to read, then looked up again. He was still there, unmoving. I pulled out my phone and checked the time just to break eye contact. When I looked up again, he was gone. Not walking away, just gone. I stayed another 10 minutes, trying to write it off as nothing. A glance mistaken for a stare. A trick of the light. Cities are full of people, and people are full of habits you're not supposed to understand. Still, when I got back to the hotel, I double-locked the door. Just a reflex. The next morning, I almost convinced myself it had been nothing. I slept fine. The hotel was quiet. I had a long breakfast downstairs and then wandered through Le Marais for most of the afternoon. The weather had warmed up slightly and the streets were buzzing tourists, students, street musicians. I even forgot about the man from the cafe until something reminded me. I passed a narrow gallery and instinctively looked near the doorway, half expecting to see him again. I didn't, and I told myself that was proof, just my imagination filling in gaps. That evening, around 6, I stopped by a small bakery on Rue Vieux du Temple to grab something for dinner. The place was busy, 3 or 4 people in front of me, a couple more behind. It was one of those narrow shops with tall glass counters and nowhere to really move once you were inside. While I waited, I felt a shift behind me. That prickly feeling like someone too close, breathing in your space. I turned just slightly and there he was. The man. He was standing directly behind me. Close enough to smell his coat, something like tobacco and old wool. He wasn't looking at the bread or the menu board. He was looking at me. I froze for a second, then turned fully toward him. He blinked slowly, made eye contact. No reaction. I opened my mouth to say something, what, I don't know, but then the line moved and I turned back. I bought a sandwich and walked out without looking back. I don't even remember which direction I turned. I just walked fast and didn't stop until I saw the lights of my hotel ahead. Back in my room, I sat on the bed and tried to talk myself down. It wasn't illegal to be in a bakery. He hadn't followed me inside, or at least I hadn't seen him do that. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe it was just one of those weird travel coincidences. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about how he looked at me. Not curious, not confused, just present, as if he was waiting for something I didn't know I'd agreed to. That night, I kept the lights on, and every time I passed the window, I checked the street. I was more careful the next evening. After what happened at the bakery, I stayed close to the hotel. I went out only to grab dinner at a nearby grocery store and came back before dark. The hotel lobby was quiet when I returned, soft lighting, the low hum of the elevator. I remember feeling silly for being so on edge. The man hadn't done anything, not really. Just appeared, looked, but the repetition, the sense of being watched, was making me second-guess every ordinary interaction. I rode the elevator up to the 4th floor, key card in hand, bag over my shoulder. As the doors opened, I stepped out and froze. He was there, standing at my door, room 412. His back was to me. He hadn't heard the elevator. He was facing the door directly, head tilted slightly down like he was listening. One hand rested on the handle. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't moving. Just standing. I stepped back into the elevator and hit the button for the lobby, heart pounding. The doors closed silently. Back at the front desk, I kept my voice even. There's a man outside my room. He's been following me around the city for days. This time, the staff took me seriously. The receptionist, a younger man, maybe mid-20s, stood up immediately. He called over the night manager, who asked me to wait in the office while they called hotel security. They went up together. Took maybe 5 minutes. When they returned, they told me what I already expected. He's gone. They searched the hallway, stairwell, even the emergency exit. No trace of him. The door was still locked, my room untouched. But when I described what he looked like and mentioned the earlier incidents, the manager's expression changed. We've had no record of him entering the building, he said, but we can check the surveillance feed. He brought me back into the office and queued up the hallway footage. There it was, the elevator door opening, me stepping out, and moments before that, another clip showing him entering the floor via the stairs. He's not a guest, the manager said. That exit is supposed to be locked from the outside. I asked to change rooms. They agreed. Different floor, new key card. They even sent someone up to pack my things from the old room, just in case. As I lay in the new bed that night, I didn't sleep. Because what chilled me more than anything was this. He hadn't followed me from the lobby. He had gotten there first. He knew which room was mine. I didn't leave the hotel the next day. I stayed in the new room, curtains drawn, watching old episodes of my favorite show on my laptop with the volume too low to hear. The hotel offered to move me again, but I didn't want another unfamiliar space. I just wanted to leave Paris. Around noon, the front desk manager knocked. He told me the police were coming by. They had reviewed the hotel's surveillance footage and wanted to ask me a few more questions. I agreed, although I didn't have anything new to tell them. The officer who arrived was plainspoken, polite. He carried a tablet with stills pulled from the hotel's security cameras. We've seen him before, he said quietly. Your story matches 2 other reports. He showed me a photo not from the lobby this time, but from outside another hotel across the city. Last week, he said, near Montmartre. A woman staying alone came back to find this man waiting in the stairwell. She thought it was a misunderstanding. She went into her room. He tried to force the door open an hour later. I asked what happened. She screamed. He ran. They didn't catch him that time. But now that they had clear footage from multiple locations, he was being actively searched for, not just in Paris, but across several cities. He's careful, the officer added. He doesn't leave prints. We believe he targets women staying alone. Watches them. Follows. Waits. But how did he know which room I was in? The officer shrugged slightly. We don't know. Could have seen your key card at check-in. Followed you from the lobby. Or he trailed off. Or maybe it wasn't the first time he'd been in the building. I left Paris the next morning. I didn't wait for news. I didn't want updates. I just wanted distance. I flew home, told my family everything, filed a full report. It felt strange how this entire thing existed as moments, impressions, glances. Nothing that would look terrifying on paper. But the fear had been real. I still felt it in my bones. A week later, the officer emailed me. They had caught him. Someone recognized him near Gare du Nord, loitering outside another hotel. Police were called immediately. This time, he didn't get away. He had no ID, no luggage, just a jacket, gloves, and a slip of paper in his pocket with 2 handwritten notes, a hotel name, and a room number. Neither were mine, but they were close. This happened about a year ago during a solo trip through Scotland. I wasn't doing anything dramatic, no finding myself or trying to escape a breakup or anything like that. I just needed a break, some quiet, new scenery, and a bit of space to think. I'd booked about 10 days to explore the northeast coast, starting in Edinburgh and making my way up to the Highlands. Aberdeen was just supposed to be a 2-night stopover. I picked it mostly because it was along the way and I'd heard it had some interesting architecture. I arrived by train late in the afternoon and checked into a modest hotel just a few blocks from the waterfront. Not one of those boutique places, but clean, quiet, with a view of the street and the faint sound of gulls. That was enough for me. After a quick dinner at a fish and chip spot around the corner, I decided to go for a walk. I wasn't tired yet and I wanted to see the sea. Aberdeen's beach is long and open, with a curved bay that stretches from the harbor up past Footdee and toward a more rugged, rockier coastline. It's not a warm beach. It's not for sunbathing. It's windswept, cold, and dramatic, especially in October. The kind of place where you keep your hands deep in your coat pockets and let your thoughts drift. That evening, the sky was this dense bluish gray, the kind of color that makes everything feel a bit closer than it should. The wind came in stiff off the water, but it wasn't unpleasant. I had on a good coat and a scarf, and I've always liked that sort of weather, moody but not miserable. The kind of cold that wakes you up. There weren't many people around. A few scattered walkers, most heading back toward the lights of town. A couple with a dog further up the beach. One guy jogging in shorts like he didn't feel the wind at all. I drifted toward the shore and started walking along the packed sand. The tide was low, and the water pulled back in long, slow sighs. I didn't take out my phone or put in earbuds or anything. I just walked. I remember thinking how timeless the place felt. There were no palm trees, no beach bars, nothing to distract from the rawness of it. Just sea, sky, wind, and stone. I found it oddly comforting. After a while, I noticed someone further down the beach, near where the sand gave way to large, seaweed-slick rocks. A woman. She was facing the water, standing maybe 20 or 30 feet from the surf, pacing slowly back and forth. At first, I didn't think much of it. People walk the beach all the time, but something about her movement caught my eye. She wasn't strolling or even wandering. She was moving like she was searching for something. Scanning the ground, then pausing to look at the waves, then turning and retracing her steps exactly. Again and again. She was wearing a long skirt and a shawl that flapped wildly in the wind. Her hair was long and unbound, blowing across her face in strands. She didn't seem to care. I remember thinking she had to be freezing, bare legs, thin clothes. I slowed down a little as I approached, not out of fear but out of uncertainty. I didn't want to disturb her if she was grieving or in some kind of personal moment, but I couldn't shake the unease I felt watching her. Something about the way she moved didn't feel right. I stopped maybe 50 feet away and just watched for a moment. She kept pacing, stopped, turned, paced again. I called out just to see if she needed anything. Not loudly, just a "Hey, are you all right?" She didn't turn, didn't even flinch. I tried again, a little louder. Nothing. She kept walking. That's when the wind shifted, just slightly, and I caught something in the air that I still don't know how to describe. It wasn't a smell exactly, it was more like a sensation, like walking into a room where something terrible had happened, even if you couldn't see it. I felt it in my chest, heavy, dull. The sun had nearly set, and the light was turning that strange kind of gray that doesn't cast shadows. Everything flattens. I decided to walk a bit closer. As I moved forward, I noticed something else. There were no other footprints around her, none leading to her or away. The sand was marked by the tide and seaweed, but not by shoes or bare feet. Just the prints I had made walking toward her. I paused again. She was maybe 30 feet from me now. Still hadn't acknowledged me. Still walking the same short path along the water's edge. The waves were rising a little, creeping closer. I felt a very real pull in my gut, like something was warning me to stop, to not go any closer. So I didn't. I stood there, trying to make sense of the moment, telling myself I was overthinking, that she was probably just absorbed in her own world, that the light was playing tricks, that it was all fine. And then, without turning, she stopped, completely, and started walking away from the water up toward the dunes and the path that led back to town. She didn't look at me, didn't glance over her shoulder. She just walked. Her movements were slow but steady. No hesitation. I looked down for a second, not even sure why. Maybe I was checking my phone, maybe just grounding myself. When I looked up again, she was gone. I mean completely gone. There was no cover out there. No trees, no dips in the land, no place to duck behind. Just low dunes and open sand. I ran forward, half jogging, scanning the beach, the dunes, the walkway. Nothing. And again, no footprints. That was the part that made my skin go cold. There should have been something, imprints, even faint ones, from her walking up the beach. But the sand was undisturbed. Just smooth except for my own path. I stood there for a long time. I didn't move, didn't call out again, just stared at the space where she had been. The wind was still pushing in off the sea, stronger now, cold enough that my fingers had started to go numb even inside my pockets. I scanned the beach again, forcing myself to stay logical. Maybe she had moved faster than I thought. Maybe there was some cut in the dunes I hadn't seen. Maybe she lived nearby and knew a shortcut. But even as I tried to reason it out, that feeling stayed in my chest, that slow, sinking tension like when you've walked into the wrong room at a party and everyone goes quiet. I turned back toward the path and followed it up toward the promenade. The lights of the city were flickering on now, soft orange glows through the mist. I passed a few more people, couples, dog walkers, but none of them looked like they'd seen anything out of the ordinary. I debated stopping someone and asking, but what would I say? Hey, did you see the barefoot woman in a shawl vanish without a trace? I kept walking. Back at the hotel, I went straight to my room and shut the curtains. My hands were shaking a little as I peeled off my coat. I didn't even turn on the TV. I just sat on the edge of the bed, replaying the whole thing in my head. The pacing, the clothes, the way she didn't react when I spoke, and then how she turned and walked away as if on cue and was just gone. I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound in the hallway made me sit up and listen. I left the lamp on. Around 2 a.m., I got up and checked the mirror in the bathroom, not because I expected to see anything strange, but because part of me had to make sure I only saw myself. The next morning, I tried to talk myself out of it. Maybe I'd had a panic response. Maybe I'd imagined part of it. Maybe she just walked away while I wasn't looking. People disappear from view all the time. I tried to believe that. Still, I kept thinking about the footprints. Or the lack of them. Around noon, I went out for a walk again, this time toward Union Street to grab a coffee and clear my head. It was busier, louder, easier to feel grounded in crowds. I ended up ducking into a small bookstore just off Belmont Street, one of those places that smells like old paper and has handwritten labels on the shelves. There was a woman behind the counter, probably in her 60s, with a wool cardigan and readers hanging from a chain around her neck. I made a lap through the shop but couldn't focus on any titles. When I got to the counter, I hesitated, then decided to ask. "Can I ask you something kind of odd?" I said, trying to sound casual. She looked up. "Certainly. Have you ever heard of someone seeing a woman down by the beach, dressed in old clothes? Usually at dusk." She didn't blink, didn't even act surprised. "Was she pacing?" she asked. I froze. "Yeah, she was." The woman gave a small sigh and nodded as if I'd just confirmed something she'd suspected. "You're not the first to ask," she said. "People see her now and then, usually in the off-season. Not many tourists around this time of year, so she tends to stand out more." I felt my stomach twist. "Who is she?" "No one knows for sure," she said. "Some say she was a widow. Others say she lost a child to the sea. There's no real record of her, just stories passed around. Locals don't talk about her much. Makes people uncomfortable." "Why?" "Because everyone who sees her says the same thing. She doesn't respond. She's always barefoot. And she disappears before you can follow." I didn't know what to say. "She's not malicious if that's what you're worried about," the woman added. "At least, not from what anyone said. But she's persistent. Some people see her more than once." That part made my chest tighten. "I don't think I want to see her again," I said, more to myself than to her. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "Then don't go back." I thanked her and left without buying anything. Back at the hotel, I closed the curtains again. Turned the lock, even though I knew it wouldn't help if something truly strange was going on. I didn't feel watched exactly, but I felt remembered. That evening, I went through the photos on my phone. Most were just the beach, the water, the sky turning dim. Nothing weird, nothing paranormal. But in one picture, taken from a distance, aimed toward the rocks, I noticed something odd. It was faint. Could have been a trick of the light, but it looked like a shape. A blur, slightly paler than the rocks around it, vaguely human in outline. Not sharp enough to say for sure. Not evidence of anything. But I hadn't noticed it before. I considered deleting the photo. My thumb hovered over the trash icon. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I put the phone down, turned off the light, and sat there in the quiet, listening to the occasional car outside, the occasional voice from the hall, and wondering if she was out there again, pacing the edge of the sea. I didn't leave my room that night. I kept thinking about what the woman at the bookstore had said about people seeing her more than once. That it wasn't dangerous, exactly, but still persistent. The word stuck with me. Persistent. Like something that keeps returning, not out of malice, but because it's unfinished. I tried to read, then to write. I even turned on the TV for a bit just to fill the silence, but my mind wouldn't stop circling back to the beach. To her. The way she moved. The way she didn't respond. The sudden vanishing. I checked the window a few times, though my room didn't face the sea. I don't know what I was expecting. That I'd see her walking up the street in bare feet, wind in her hair? Nothing. Just the quiet orange glow of Aberdeen's streetlights and the occasional hiss of a passing car. At some point, I fell asleep. Dreamless, thankfully. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel. I didn't mention anything to the receptionist. What would I even say? Hey, just wondering if your beachfront has any wandering specters I should avoid on my next visit. I stopped at a cafe near the train station and grabbed a coffee. I had several hours before my train to Inverness, and even though part of me was screaming don't, I found myself walking back toward the beach. It was broad daylight now. Windy but clear. The tide was out again, and the wet sand glistened under a pale sun. I didn't walk down. I stayed up on the promenade, looking out over the curve of the bay. Kids were flying kites. A guy was kicking a football with his dog. It all looked so normal. Harmless. But I kept my eyes on the rocks near the curve of the beach. No one was there. After a while, I left, took the train north, and finished my trip without incident. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Even when I got home, it lingered in the back of my mind. That strange sense that something real had happened. Something I couldn't explain. A few weeks later, I was talking with a friend who's from Scotland, born and raised in Glasgow. I told him a stripped-down version of what happened. Left out the weirdest details just to gauge his reaction. He didn't laugh. Didn't call me crazy. Instead, he said, "That sounds like a sea woman." "Eh, what?" "They're in the old stories," he said. "Women who drown, usually after losing someone. They linger near the shore, pacing or crying. Some say they're stuck, others say they're waiting." I asked if it was like a ghost. "Sort of," he said, "but more attached to the place. Like the beach remembers them." I didn't know how to respond to that. A few days later, I pulled out my phone again and looked at the photo. The one with the faint shape near the rocks. I zoomed in as far as I could. Tried to adjust the contrast. Nothing definitive. But I noticed something I hadn't before. Way off to the side, barely visible, was a second blur. Much smaller. Almost child-sized. It could have been a trick of the light. Some lens flare. A shadow. But the image made my stomach drop. I haven't shown it to anyone. I haven't told the story publicly until now. And I haven't gone back to Aberdeen. Because I keep thinking about something the woman in the bookstore said. She's not trying to hurt anyone, but she doesn't like to be ignored. This happened in Madrid during a solo trip I took about 2 years ago. I was doing a bit of a work break thing, remote job, flexible hours, so I booked a few weeks to live somewhere new, work a little, explore a bit, nothing fancy. I chose Madrid because I'd always wanted to visit, and it had a good mix of energy and history. Plus, I speak enough Spanish to get by. I booked an Airbnb for 10 nights in the La Latina neighborhood, older part of the city, lots of character, close to food markets, and walkable to most things. The flat looked great in the listing. Exposed beams, white stone walls, compact but cozy. The reviews were solid. The host had multiple listings with positive feedback. I arrived in Madrid mid-afternoon, took the metro from the airport, and messaged the host to say I was about 20 minutes out. That's when she replied, "Hola, there's been a last-minute plumbing issue with the original flat. But don't worry, we have another place nearby for you. Very similar, just as nice." There was a link to the address and a set of instructions. Top floor, keys under the mat, lock the door behind me. I should have questioned it more, but I was tired. I didn't want to make a thing of it. I figured these things happen, and if she had another property ready to go, fine. So I went. The building was a little older than the original listing. Same area, maybe 3 blocks away. A narrow street, lots of shadow even in the afternoon. It had those black metal balconies and heavy stone walls, the kind that don't let sound in or out. I buzzed up. No answer. But I had the code to the door, and the keys were where she said they'd be. Inside, the stairwell smelled faintly of bleach and something older. Maybe mildew, but nothing overpowering. The flat was on the 3rd floor, no elevator. By the time I reached the top, I was out of breath, sweating through my travel clothes. The key worked. I stepped inside. It was fine. Not bad, not great. Small kitchen to the left, living room with a small TV and a fold-out sofa. There was a bedroom straight ahead and a narrow hallway leading to what I assumed was the bathroom. But there was another door too off the hallway. Closed. No handle, just a keyhole. It was painted the same color as the wall, like someone tried to make it disappear. I messaged the host. "Hey, just checking, what's the locked room in the hallway?" She replied a minute later. "Oh, just storage. Nothing you need to worry about." Okay. I unpacked, opened the windows, took a shower. It was warm out, but the inside of the flat felt oddly cool. Not in a comfortable way, in a dense way like the walls held in cold. That night, I stayed in. Ordered food, answered some emails, watched a show. But I couldn't stop looking at that door. It wasn't just that it was locked. It was how quiet it felt around it. Like the hallway had no echo. Like sound didn't travel through it. At one point, I stood right next to it and knocked gently. Nothing. I leaned in. Still nothing. The next few days were uneventful. I worked, wandered the city, ate a lot of tapas. The apartment was quiet, eerily so. I told myself that was a good thing, but something about the silence got under my skin. It wasn't city quiet. It was sealed quiet. I stopped noticing it until the 4th night. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard something. A small click. Like a latch. I sat up. The street outside was empty. No cars. The windows were closed. Nothing in the kitchen was on. I listened for a few seconds and decided I was just being paranoid. I went back to sleep. The next night, same time, just past 3 a.m., I woke up again. No sound this time, just this feeling, like I wasn't alone. I stared down the hallway. It was dark, but I could make out the door. Still closed. I got up and walked to the bathroom. On the way back, I passed the door and paused. I don't know what made me do it, but I pressed my palm against the wood. It was cold. I knocked again, just once, and from inside, something shifted. It was subtle, like fabric moving, or someone adjusting in bed. I froze, waited, then stepped back and returned to the bedroom, heart racing. The next morning, I messaged the host again. "Hey, not trying to be a pain, but I'm hearing noises near the storage room at night. Are you sure no one else has access to the place?" She didn't reply. All day, I kept checking. Nothing. Then finally, around 6 p.m., a message popped up. "So sorry. Been busy. No one else has access, I promise. It's just storage." The smiley face made me more uneasy. That night, I left the hallway light on. I fell asleep around midnight and woke up again at 3:17 a.m. Same feeling. This time, I sat up and just watched the hallway. And right around 3:30, I heard it again. A click, then a creak. I got out of bed and walked slowly to the hallway. The door was open about an inch. Just a sliver. I didn't touch it. Didn't even breathe loud. I backed away and stayed up the rest of the night with the bedroom door closed and locked. The next morning, I booked a hotel across town. I told the host there was a problem with the plumbing and I needed to leave early. She said okay and no refund, but okay. I packed and left before sunset. The weirdest part came 3 weeks later. I was back home by then, scrolling through my Airbnb history when I noticed something odd. The listing for the original apartment I had booked? It was gone. No reviews, no listing ID. It just said this listing is no longer available. And the one I ended up staying in? I couldn't find it anywhere. Not under the host's name. Not with the address. It was like neither apartment had ever existed. I still don't know what was behind that door, and I'm not sure I ever want to. This happened in Warsaw about 8 months ago. I was there for work, just a few days for a conference. I'd been to Poland once before, but never to Warsaw, and figured I'd book a few extra days after the event to explore on my own. I stayed in an Airbnb near Praga Palmach. It was a decent area, up and coming, lots of character. The flat was small but modern, and I liked that it was a little outside the tourist zones. Quiet, but with good tram access. On my second to last night, I went out kind of late. I'd eaten dinner near the old town, then walked around for a bit, taking photos and soaking in the atmosphere. Around 11:30, I caught the tram back toward my place. It wasn't crowded, just a few people scattered through the car. I sat by the window and put in earbuds. About 2 stops in, I noticed a guy sitting across the aisle and 1 row behind me. He wasn't doing anything weird, just sitting there, hands in his lap. But I had that weird awareness you get when someone's looking at you. You don't see it, you feel it. I glanced over. He looked away immediately. Late 30s maybe, short dark hair, puffy green coat. Could have been anyone. I looked back out the window, not thinking much of it. The tram emptied out a little more over the next few stops. Eventually, it was just me, the guy, and 2 others sitting far up front. When my stop came, I got up and stepped off. I could hear someone behind me on the stairs, but again, didn't think too hard about it. Until I glanced back and saw it was him. I turned and started walking toward the flat, which was about a 5-minute walk from the tram stop. I didn't look back again until I was almost at the building. He was still there, same distance, just walking. Now, it's not weird for people to get off at the same stop. I told myself that 100 times. Still, something about the way he walked felt measured. Like he wasn't in a hurry, but wasn't letting me get too far ahead either. When I reached the front entrance, I made a split-second decision not to enter right away. Instead, I walked past the building and turned the corner like I'd forgotten something. I waited about 10 seconds, then peeked back. He had stopped, just outside my building's door. He stood there for a few seconds, then kept walking slowly in the same direction I had been going. That was enough for me. I looped around the block, gave it a few more minutes, then returned and went inside. The door locked behind me with a heavy click, and I stayed still in the stairwell for a while, just listening. Nothing. Back in the apartment, I tried to laugh it off. Paranoia. Coincidence. Big city. But I double-checked the locks on every door and window anyway. The next morning, I was planning to leave for the train station around 9 a.m. I had packed most of my things the night before. When I woke up around 7:30, I noticed I had a message on WhatsApp from an unknown number. No name. Polish number. It was just a photo. A picture of my ABB building, taken from across the street. No text, just the image. My stomach dropped. I stared at it for a long time, then blocked the number immediately. I don't know why I didn't screenshot it. I was panicking, trying to think logically. Could it have been someone I met at the conference? Someone who followed me on social media? I checked everything. No one had that address. I hadn't posted anything geotagged. And then came the second photo. It arrived about 15 minutes later. This time, it was a shot of my window from directly across the street. The curtain was open slightly. I recognized the plant on the windowsill. That one made me physically sick. I closed every blind, shut the inner doors, and sat on the floor. No message followed. Just silence. After the second photo, the one of my window, I locked myself in the bathroom for a while. Not because I thought I was in immediate danger, but because it was the only room with no windows and a heavy, solid door. I sat on the floor with the light off, my back against the tub, phone in hand, trying to talk myself down. Maybe he just saw me enter the building and followed me on a whim. Maybe he figured out what window was mine somehow. Maybe it was just a scare. I knew those weren't real explanations. But I needed something to hang on to. Eventually, I left the bathroom and shut every curtain and blind as tightly as I could. I didn't have a weapon, just a heavy glass bottle of olive oil I found in the kitchen. I kept it with me the rest of the morning. By 8:45, I was packed and dressed, ready to leave an hour early. I didn't even eat. Then my phone buzzed again. A third photo. This one was blurry. Taken at night. From ground level. The building was just barely visible, but I recognized the corner of the tram stop. My tram stop. And this time, there was text. Nice place. Quiet. No name. No follow-up. I'd already blocked the number once, so this had to be from a different phone. My hands were shaking. I was on the verge of calling the police, but I hesitated. What would I report? A photo? A man I saw once on public transit? Instead, I called an Uber. I didn't want to risk walking to the station or taking the tram again. As I waited by the front door, I kept the bottle in one hand and stood to the side of the window. The street outside was normal. Cars, morning foot traffic, someone walking their dog. But I didn't feel normal. At the train station, I kept checking over my shoulder. I scanned every face around me. At the cafe, at the ticket kiosk, in the waiting area. Nothing. No puffy green coat. No staring man. I boarded the train and exhaled fully for the first time in hours. The motion of the train helped. The noise. The distance. Still, I kept the curtains down the whole ride to Krakow. When I checked into my hotel there, I finally told someone. A close friend I trusted. I didn't want to post about it online, but I needed to tell someone what had happened. They took it seriously. Asked if I wanted help contacting local authorities. I said maybe, but I didn't know what to give them. The number was foreign. The photos were gone. I hadn't saved them. I felt stupid. That night, I barely slept. Every creak from the hallway made me tense. I left the lights on. Slept in sweats, ready to run. No more messages came. No photos. No sign of him. It took me a few days to feel halfway normal again. By the time I left Poland, the tension had faded enough for me to convince myself it was over. Maybe I'd been targeted randomly. Maybe the guy was just a creep who got a kick out of messing with someone. Maybe I'd been lucky to get away without anything worse happening. But it stayed with me, this itch in the back of my mind. The feeling that something still didn't make sense. Back home, a few weeks later, I finally did something I'd been avoiding. I opened up my cloud backup and went through the recently deleted photos on my phone. I had auto backup enabled, and sometimes images synced even if I trashed them quickly. I scrolled back to the day I left Warsaw. Sure enough, there were the images I deleted. The first one was of my building, then the one of my window, then the blurry shot near the tram stop with the text, "Nice place. Quiet." Seeing them again made my skin crawl. But it was the fourth photo, the one I didn't remember at all, that stopped me cold. It was taken in near total darkness. The shot was angled down from head height. A grainy image of my bed. I was in it, asleep. The photo wasn't framed cleanly. It looked rushed, but you could clearly see my head on the pillow, the blanket pulled up, the curve of my shoulder. And at the bottom of the frame, barely visible, was a silhouette of a shoe. His shoe. He had been inside the apartment. I stared at the timestamp. 3:17 a.m. That was the night I'd stayed up late pacing. The night I'd sat in the bathroom for nearly an hour. I must have fallen asleep with the light on. I remember waking up with the lamp still on the bedside table. He'd been there while I was asleep. I don't remember the act of deleting that photo. I'm guessing I panicked, did it automatically with the others. But the fact that it synced to the cloud first, that it existed at all, shook me to my core. I didn't sleep that night, or the one after. I changed all my passwords, set up security cameras at home, bought multiple locks. And I never stay in street-level flats anymore. Ever. I wish there was some tidy ending to this. That the police caught him. That I learned his name. That he got arrested. But I never reported it. I couldn't explain enough of it. Couldn't prove how he got in. There was no sign of forced entry. No fingerprints. Just a single deleted photo. That's what still gets me. He didn't break in. He had a way in. He had time to take a picture. And then he left without waking me. Just because he could. I was in Zagreb for a week this past spring, part vacation, part remote work. I'd been traveling through Central Europe and needed a place to settle for a few days, somewhere with decent Wi-Fi and quiet enough to get some work done. Zagreb seemed like the right balance, interesting but not overwhelming. I found a flat on Airbnb just east of the city center. Decent price, solid reviews, modern-looking space. The host, Philip, was responsive and friendly in messages. He said he wouldn't be there to check me in but left the key in a lockbox by the door. Standard stuff. The apartment was clean, simple, IKEA everything, with a long hallway, a combined living/kitchen space, a bedroom, and a small balcony. It felt almost too neutral, like no one really lived there, but I didn't think much of it at the time. The building itself was quiet. Mostly retirees, based on the few people I saw in the stairwell. I spent the first couple of days working, sightseeing a little, grabbing takeout in the evenings. I barely used the kitchen except to make coffee. On the third day, I had back-to-back video calls and didn't leave the apartment at all. Around 4 p.m., someone knocked on the door. Not the buzzer, the door. It made me jump a little. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hadn't ordered anything. I got up and looked through the peephole. A man was standing there, maybe early 40s, stocky, wearing a navy blue jacket with a stitched white name tag. I couldn't read the name clearly, but the logo looked like a generic plumbing or building service. He had a clipboard in one hand. I opened the door a crack. "Hi," he said in English with a slight accent. "I'm here to check pipes." Routine check from the building owner. I hesitated. "The owner sent me," he added. "Just a few minutes under the kitchen sink. I need to look, write down a number." I was caught off guard, but he seemed professional. Calm. Didn't push. I didn't want to be rude or create a scene if this was something prearranged. So I let him in. He walked straight to the kitchen like he'd been there before. Opened the cupboard under the sink, shone a flashlight in, crouched, and scribbled something on his clipboard. I stood in the living room, watching. He didn't touch anything else. After maybe 90 seconds, he stood up and gave a polite nod. "Thanks," he said. "All good." And just like that, he was gone. I locked the door behind him and sat down, a little weirded out, but I told myself it was probably standard. Some EU regulation, maybe? Building inspections. Who knows? Still, I messaged Philip just to check. "Hey, just FYI, a guy came by from building maintenance. Said he was checking under the sink. Just making sure that was expected." I didn't hear back right away, so I went back to work. Philip didn't respond until a few hours later. By then it was dark out and I had almost convinced myself it was just a routine thing. Still, I kept the hallway light on and double-checked the door lock. Twice. Around 9:40 p.m. His message came through. "Hi, what? There shouldn't be anyone entering the apartment. I haven't scheduled any maintenance. Can you describe him?" My stomach dropped. I messaged back quickly, giving as much detail as I could. Older guy, blue jacket, clipboard, maybe early 40s. Said he was checking pipes under the sink. Polite, not aggressive. Definitely acted like it was routine. Philip responded almost instantly. "No, absolutely not. That's not something we do during guest stays. No staff has a key. No one should have been there. Please check all doors and windows now." I got up and did a full sweep. Front door locked. Bedroom window locked. Balcony door also locked. Everything looked normal. Nothing missing, nothing moved. But that was the worst part. It didn't look like anything had happened. Yet now I knew someone had been inside and no one could confirm who. I asked Philip if I should report it to the building manager or police. He told me he'd try to figure out who had accessed the building. Said he'd message me in the morning. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I kept looking over my shoulder. Every noise in the hallway made me freeze. I didn't go out. Didn't trust leaving the apartment unattended. I even moved a kitchen chair in front of the door. It made me feel dumb, but it was something. Around noon, I decided to really check the place. Not just doors and windows, but everything. I opened every cabinet, pulled open every drawer. I even lifted up the couch cushions, looking for it. I don't know what. Something. And that's when I found it. Under the sink. Pushed deep behind a stack of cleaning supplies was a small black plastic disc. Flat. Circular. No bigger than a quarter. I picked it up and turned it over. There was no logo, no writing. But there was a tiny lens in the center. It was a camera. It didn't have any visible wires, but it had that faint, glossy feel of electronics. I set it on the counter and just stared at it. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I wrapped it in a towel and stuffed it into my backpack. I messaged Philip again. I found a camera under the sink. Hidden. Wasn't there when I arrived. No response. I waited 10 minutes, pacing the kitchen. Then 30. Then an hour. Nothing. I finally left the apartment for the first time that day. Took the camera with me and walked a few blocks to a cafe where I could sit near other people. I called Airbnb support and explained everything, the man who showed up, the unauthorized access, the hidden device. They were polite. Took notes. Said they'd open an investigation. I could tell they were reading off a script. The person on the other end had never been followed around an apartment by silence. When I got back, I packed my things. Philip still hadn't responded. I booked a hotel across town for my last night in Zagreb. Something with a front desk, security cameras, and other people around. I left the apartment before sunset, didn't even bother waiting for Philip's reply. He never messaged back. That night, I stared at the little black disc I'd wrapped in a towel. I hadn't let it out of my sight. Back home a week later, I decided to figure out what it actually was. I ordered a cheap card reader and some tools from Amazon. It felt obsessive, but I couldn't just forget about it, not until I knew what it had seen. The device turned out to be a micro SD camera. It didn't transmit wirelessly. It was the kind of thing you'd hide in a wall clock or smoke detector, meant to record silently until retrieved. When I finally plugged it in and opened the files, my heart started racing. The video folder had 19 clips. The first was timestamped the same afternoon the man came by. It showed an angle from beneath the sink, just cleaning supplies, and the underside of the cabinet. But then I saw motion. Legs? Mine. I was walking past the sink in socks. At one point, I crouched to grab a coffee mug from the cabinet. I had no idea I was being recorded. Each video was 15 to 20 minutes long. The camera only activated when it sensed movement. Over the next few hours, it captured shots of me cooking, working, eating, all completely unaware. Then I got to the final file. It was timestamped 2 hours after I found the camera. 2 hours after I wrapped it in a towel. The screen was black for a few seconds, then jolted upright. The video was shaky, handheld, as if someone was carrying it. It wasn't me. The camera tilted, swiveled, caught brief shots of my backpack, my apartment key, and then me. I was asleep in bed. The image was fuzzy, low light, but it was me curled on my side, breathing steadily. The angle moved slightly slowly. Whoever had taken the camera had brought it back. They had returned after I'd left it in my bag. They had walked into the apartment again and filmed me sleeping. The video ended abruptly. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to understand it, trying to convince myself it was a glitch or a hoax or anything but what it clearly was. Whoever that man was, he hadn't planted the camera to watch me from afar. He had access. And for at least one night, he came back,